good priorities. The bad priorities, we're not even going to pass them. We're just not voting. So that concludes my talk. I don't know. I'm seriously trying to adapt to a new world, and it's hard. So, first of all, we have to figure out, listen, when we're talking about getting bills through the House, where are we now? Well, we're progressing from where we were 10 years ago. We didn't have groups like Empower Texans that would have grassroots summits with this many people. We didn't have an organized and educated grassroots force like we have now. And we didn't have the legislative representation that we have now. Every session, when you look at the rankings for most conservative legislators, the existing legislators are always moving down. The new guys are always at the top. It's interesting. So we're replacing establishment legislators with new conservative blood, and that's what we need. Not only because it sends a message to people in office that if they want to stay in office, they better legislate conservatively, but also it increases pressure from the inside, which is what I'm going to talk about, how you guys play a role in that as well, and how we work with you. So just to give you some background, the structure of the House and the bill process. We'll start bill filing next week, which is early bill filing. We won't actually have committees assembled until mid-February, and then we'll start hearing bills around that time. So we'll get an idea as to what's being proposed very soon, and we have to start getting motivated and choosing our priorities. The next step is the bills are selected to get heard in committee. That's the first hurdle you need to get your bill heard. A lot of times bills are killed by the committee chairs. They simply don't get a hearing. Sometimes if there's enough political pressure placed on them, they will hear a bill. And then if the bill is not something that leadership wants to move or the committee chair wants to move, they'll simply not take a vote on it. Very rarely vote a bill down. They just won't take a vote on it, claim it doesn't have the votes, etc. So the second step is to get a vote on your bill in committee. Once the bill's passed out of committee, it goes to the Calendars Committee, which is chaired by currently Todd Hunter, and the bills that flow through that committee are very closely controlled by leadership. That's the toughest hurdle. A lot of times they'll pass a bill out of committee, they'll say, hey, look, I voted for your bill in committee. You got the calendars, you just didn't get it scheduled. What you'll find is the games that are played in Calendars Committee are very shrewd. For example, there was a pro-life bill dealing with insurance coverages for abortions last session. It got passed out of committee. It got scheduled on calendars. Yeah, by the way, it's a running thing. Everything is past the Senate, basically, okay? Yes. I wish I was in the Senate. The bills come over usually very early from the Senate. And they'll go into calendars, they'll get scheduled, and they'll get scheduled as probably 150th on the calendar to the last day of the deadline to pass bills. And then the storyline will be, well, we scheduled it, we just didn't get to it. And it happens time after time again. So, the third step, get it out of calendars. Once you get it out of calendars, you get it to the floor. That's the easy part. Because once you get a good conservative bill to the floor, the reps can't vote against it. They know it because they have to win a primary with your votes, and they have to pretend they're conservative. So the goal is to keep the establishment reps from taking a bad vote. So that's where you come in, and that's what we're doing behind the scenes. We are trying to make it so that these bills can get pushed through the process to get to an inevitable floor vote where reps are put in a position that they can't vote against it. Or if they do vote against it, then they put themselves in a position where they can't win a primary. And that's the goal. So, how you guys can help is very important. The first thing is to increase your sphere of influence in your own communities. I can tell you that every single rep in the State House knows practically every single person in their district who has influence over 30 or more people. They just do. And it doesn't take that much. So different people, I mean, all of the reps are very, very attuned to what those influencers think. So how can you influence more? Increase your own sphere of influence, and they'll know you. And they will pay attention to what you have to say on each bill. The second thing you can do is, calling them is very effective, but you got to get everybody on the same page, calling, trying to motivate them. They pay disproportionate attention to Facebook. However, Facebook doesn't work towards influencing legislation because they oftentimes dismiss it. It's very easy to dismiss. Getting people on the phone, getting people to a committee hearing when one's scheduled, that helps. So when you go through the process, follow your bills and start early. Start in January. Start calling, demanding a committee hearing. Call the committee chair and call your rep. And then once it gets to a committee vote, passed out of committee, then start calling calendars committee members. Make sure that stuff gets out. Make sure that they know that you know the games that are being played. And lastly, you have to pay attention to, in order to be effective, you really need to know what motivates the different representatives that you're trying to influence, right? Not all of them are influenced by smaller groups of calls. Some of them are influenced by principle. Those are the good guys. Some of them are influenced by fear of not getting reelected. Those are some other guys. Some guys are influenced by legitimate policy concerns and just have a moderate policy view of the world. You have to know what your rep's influenced by. Very often on the floor, you can see, we'll have a bill that comes up, for example, and reps don't read it. So they'll be influenced by how you categorize the bill and whether or not they see a mailer in their head in the next primary. So there might be a bill that has something to do with, transportation, which came up last session. There was a rider placed on one of the bills that created a board for transportation, and the Democrats placed something on it that created an affirmative action process and racial quota process for selecting the board. And we simply told everybody in our section, you're voting on an affirmative action bill, just know that. And we got the votes against it. We got it stripped from the bill because everyone was afraid because they categorized it as affirmative action bill. But no one thought of it as an affirmative action bill until we started characterizing it as that. So one of the things that I would say is look at the reps you trust and look at the bills that they're focused on, because we're going to try to send messages to you guys as to what bills are coming out. And if you can use that to pressure the other reps as well, and let them know that you're attuned to what's going on, it really does help. So when that affirmative action bill does come out, you can call them and say, hey, I know you voted for affirmative action. Or I know you voted for immigration. I know you tried to kill an immigration bill. Very important. Second thing that you need to be aware of is a lot of guys are motivated by lobbyists versus grassroots sheer fear. Not the bills at all. So what they're thinking in their head is, okay, I want to make the lobbyists happy, and the grassroots don't know about this. All you need to do is make sure you are aware that you know about a particular issue that's coming through, and you are very attuned to it. And then in their head, the balances shift. They do, and that's very important. So, it's a combination of things. You need to have a good policy argument. You have to craft a bill in a concise way to sell it to your legislator. That it's a bad vote for them or a good vote for them, depending on what you want to do. And you want to put pressure on them so that you guys, the pressure that they feel from you guys exceeds the pressure that they feel from the lobbyists. And then lastly, follow our lead on these things. We're going to try to keep you as educated as possible throughout the process and let you know exactly what's happening, let you know what's behind that 80-page bill and why we voted for it or against it. Find the guys you trust. By the way, that's why they hate us. They don't hate us because we vote against them. I can tell you this. We could vote against them all day and they would not vote against us. The reason why they hate us is because, number one, we put them to bad votes on the floor by taking the proposals they don't want to vote on. forcing them to vote on them. And the second reason why they hate us as well is because we tell you the truth. So they can't frame the bill as something it's not. And we tell you what's really going on. So follow that lead, and together, teaming up with our conservative legislators, I think we can get some things through that we wouldn't otherwise. And we can have a very successful session. You know, if your rep is not in the top 15 conservatives in the House in virtually any of the rankings that you look at, there's somebody who probably isn't taking the lead on these issues, but they can be moved. Anytime you see majority vote, right? Some of the people were moved to vote for a bill that they didn't want to vote for. And that was by a team effort, us and you, working together. So follow our lead, and I look forward to working with you next session towards getting some great things done. And I'm looking forward to the next talk, which is something close to my heart as well, which is killing bills. So I actually want to give an introduction to you know, my next favorite legislator. I want to say and close that scientifically, he is the second most conservative legislator in the state. It's just science. Listen, we are so blessed to have legislators like Jonathan Stickland and the other great conservatives like Van Taylor in the Senate and teaming up. We're going to do amazing things this session, and I don't mean that in my Trump campaign way. But no, we really are. School choice, reducing the size of government, property taxes, immigration, these are all things that are on the table. These are all things that we can accomplish, and we're going to not be able to do it without your help. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, first off, I just want you to know that there is more than one scorecard in the state of Texas, and there were all but one that I beat Matt Rinaldi on, and the one that he did beat me on is the only one that doesn't list which votes they're actually scorecarding in the Rice University. No. Listen, here's the truth. The best thing that we can do for the state of Texas is have a bunch of guys fighting for that number one spot. And I will tell you right now, wait till you meet some of these young whippersnappers we got elected in the last go-around. They are chomping at the bit to make us both look moderate. One back here, Kyle Biederman, I have very high hopes for that man right back there. So I remember my freshman session going into it, and me and Van, we didn't know each other before I got elected, but we got to know each other pretty quickly because I had some ideas on some rule changes. And, you know, so I showed up to this rules committee hearing where you're supposed to discuss some of the different changes you want to make to the House rules, which is one of the first votes that we have. And there were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 members that showed up, and Van Taylor showed up and he had like 12 binders with him. And he's leading the charge. And what Van taught me early on, just a month and a half before session, I think it was knowledge is power in this process. And I think that is the biggest key to killing legislation, is knowing the way that the game is supposed to be played, knowing the rules and how things are going to work. Because what you will quickly realize, and if you've been to the Texas Capitol, you'll notice this. If you stand outside in the lobby and watch all the representatives walk onto the Texas House floor, literally 75% of them have nothing in their hands, which is strange. They don't have a binder, they don't have notepads, they don't have a computer, nothing. And you quickly realize that they have no idea what we're doing that day, most of them. There are only a handful of people on the Texas House floor who have any idea what is on the agenda and what they're going to be casting their vote for. And you will have members come up and tell you, oh, don't worry about all that stuff, oh, we don't read the bill. They will literally tell you, find someone you trust on the subject and just follow them on the board. And at first I was like, man, that is super depressing. And then I realized there's a lot of opportunity with this current scenario. And you see it as you go through session. Conservatives start winning and gaining votes as they start to see the end of session and a return to home, where they have to face the voters and go to Sunday school and shop at the same grocery store. It's amazing how the conservative vote count goes up as we get closer to going home. But knowledge is power, and simply knowing what you're voting on that day, like Matt said, huge deal. Because, okay. So I'll tell a real. There's so many stories we could tell, but the lottery was one of my favorites, and the lottery was coming up for the Sunset Commission, and we noticed, hey, it was a busy day. There was not supposed to be any controversy. I don't think there were really any amendments filed at that time. It was just supposed to kind of happen. And we decided, hey, all the conservatives got together. Do you remember this? All the conservatives got together. Scott Sanford, actually, was one of the ones that was kind of leading the charge. And we said, hey, nobody's paying attention to this. So when this vote comes up, let's all be at our desks and immediately vote no as quickly as we can. So we did, and Speaker Strauss was up there, I'll never forget it, and he said, all right, members, it's time to vote. And they start ringing the bell. Well, instantly we lit up like 25 no votes, okay? And all these nincompoops on the House floor who were talking about the night before or, what they had for lunch, nothing to do with the vote at hand, they look up at the board and they see a sea of red, and then they just all hit red. And they have no idea why, but we're all just kind of standing there. I remember kind of looking around like, oh my gosh, this is working. The speaker is standing up at the deal, and it was like the longest period of time that I've seen with him just letting people vote, because he has a number counter. So we only get to see, green or red. There's not a number count until the gavel goes down, and then they announce it. So he's seeing the number, and he's seeing we're about to completely get rid of the lottery commission, which is about $4 or $5 billion in revenue. And he gave it as much time as he could. Eventually, he had to slam the gavel down, and it was dead, and the lottery was dead and gone in the state of Texas for a number of hours. It turned out there were a bunch of computer malfunctions, you guys, that it turns out. But here's the biggest enemy to any bill. If you want to kill a bill, here's what you need to understand. Time is your best friend. If you want to kill a bill, you need to stall. And there's a number of different ways that you can stall. We found kind of resurrected a lost art, which is talking for 10 minutes or getting 5 signatures on a local and consent bill. And if you go up and ask questions on a local and consent bill for 10 minutes, the bill is dead and it has to go back through committee. Well, you do that enough times, and once you, like Matt said, trying to push it through, when you're trying to stop legislation, you're trying to just stall it. So sending it back to the end of the line is usually the death for a bill on local and consent. And what I have found over the last 2 sessions that I've been down there is an important aspect of killing a bill is proving to every single person that you're willing to kill a bill. There are so many people who talk a big game in politics. Guess what? If I say I'm going to kill a bill, nobody questions it anymore in the Texas House. And let me tell you how that translates into power. That translates into power because there are bills that never make it to the floor if a certain number of individuals will just simply say, we're going to kill your bill. If 5 conservatives say we're going to sign a piece of paper, most of the members don't want controversy. They don't want a bill to go down. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have to answer questions for 10 minutes. So they'll pull the bill down before it ever even gets on the calendar. I can't tell you how many times that happened last session. It's not in the record. They just quietly went up to the speaker after we contacted them and let them know, we're going down on yours. Yours is going down. That's the way it is. Once we had proven that we were willing to do that time and time again, we used that. I remember one of my favorite tricks was Calling a point of order, we tried to kill the pre-K bill the last session. And that really made Governor Abbott mad, but it was a bad bill. And we called 3 different points of order. And we weren't actually, that bill passed, but I will tell you, as a result of calling the points of order and bringing grassroots attention to the issue, and I appreciate everything some of the Tea Party groups and conservatives did against that bill, it gave us leverage, and we made that bill a lot better than what it originally was. It gave us leverage. When you're willing to kill a bill or throw up an amendment and cause havoc, you have the leverage. We did it on crisis pregnancy centers with Texas Right to Life last session, going to the floor and forcing votes on things like defunding in-state college tuition for illegals, and the next thing we know, it was a bargaining piece, and we ended up with almost $20 million for crisis pregnancy centers. But you have to be able and willing, and they have to believe that you're going to follow through with when you talk this big game. And I will tell you, I think this is one of the mistakes that the grassroots has made in the past. We cannot cry wolf on things that you're not willing to do. Don't ever tell a legislator that I'm going to run against you, or I'm going to fund your opponent, or do those things unless you're going to follow through. Because you get to do that once, maybe twice in this process. Then you become irrelevant. So make your words matter. And Matt is absolutely correct. I know every single person in my district who controls more than a handful of votes. And I try and understand where they are on all the issues. Every single member down there does. So a lot of times you don't have to make a basic threat from the grassroots standpoint and say, we're going to, if you vote for that bill, then we're going to vote you out of office. You better be willing to go block walk for the next guy that raises his hands. You better be willing to write a check. We notice all of those things. Every time a campaign finance report is due, guess what we do for the next 24 hours? Scroll through and make a list of every single person, that gave to our opponent. And how are we going to aim? This is how everybody thinks down there. Most, now it's a lot easier. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. But the way to kill a bill is to know what's going on, have the knowledge, be able to influence others on it, being bold enough to use the rules to your advantage, and understand that time can be your best friend. Another way to do it is, we had this crazy idea in my office at the start of last session. We're like, you know what? We read a bill and it was so horrible. We're like, how did this bill get filed in the state of Texas? And I joked and I said, that's the bad bill of the week right there. And so we put it up on Facebook and said, bad bill of the week. Here's the one. Call this representative's office and tell him not to file this bill. And you did. You called the office, and I'm on the floor like 2 hours later, and this member's like, please, tell him we canceled the committee hearing, we're not even requesting it, tell the calls to stop. Of course I didn't. And y'all kept calling. And then we're like, we're going to do this next week. So we kind of just did it every week for the rest of session. And I'm 99% sure that every bill that we labeled as the bad bill of the week that you guys called on did not become law. And that was really you guys. And what Matt said about following the lead of some of us, look, I'll be honest with you guys. You need to trust and verify everything, even we tell you, okay? None of us are looking for a blank slate. And I have sat out where you are way too long to ask for that kind of approval. It always scares me when people come up to me and say, and I know they're well-intentioned, but they're like, you got my vote for as long as you keep running for office. You should never look at any of us that way. Okay? It's just the truth. However, some of us, I believe, have earned the benefit of the doubt. And I think that you need to try and trust, but also verify. And if we say there's something going on, if Matt Rinaldi posts something on Facebook, it's probably a very good idea. We talk about things and messaging and social media stuff, and we need your help. Because, again, we're 1 out of 150 members in the Texas House. And there's a lot of people who vote against them that are very quiet on the sidelines, okay? You can sit down and vote however you want, just don't make a ruckus. Matt is exactly right. They hate us, Because so far, many of you have responded to us. And if we say this is a bad bill, you guys call. You need to keep doing that. And, you know, we will hold ourselves accountable. You need to continue holding us accountable. But we need to work together, too. Thankfully, we have groups like Empower Texans and Texas Right to Life, Texas Homeschool Coalition that are looking out and doing a lot of the legwork for us and pointing us in the right direction. But knowing the rules, not being afraid to do it, and following through with your threats will get you very far in the process of killing a bill. So I think we're going to take questions, but...
Well, it's great to be here with all of you, and I'll tell my favorite Jonathan Stickland story since he's sitting next to me. We were on the floor of the House in 2013. That's when we did the constitutional amendment for a water bill and a constitutional amendment for a transportation bill. And arguably one of the most powerful members of the Texas House had an amendment that basically was forcing the transportation lobby to make sure the water bill, the water amendment passed. And I asked him a couple of questions about it. He was kind of cryptic, and I said, whatever, I voted against it, I don't care. And then the next guy in line was this guy, Jonathan Stickland. And he asks some questions, and he figures out what's going on. He says, you know, this is the kind of cynical thing that makes people hate politics. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm like, you can't say that to the chairman. And then the chairman said, I withdraw my amendment. He looked like a whipped dog. Anyway, so John.
And then he retired.
Yeah, then he retired. That was that. Yeah, but I just want to say, you know, I came up as a grassroots activist, very active in the party. In the 2004 election, I had not one but two George Bush signs firmly in my front yard, and they were stolen in the middle of the night. And I was undeterred, went back to party headquarters, got two more George Bush signs, put those in the front yard, and yet again, those were stolen. So I went back to headquarters, got two more signs, and being an Eagle Scout, United States Marine, I said I need to change my tactics. So I got a yellow Post-it note, and I wrote on there, Dear would-be sign stealer, I fought in Iraq for your First Amendment freedoms. Please respect mine and do not steal my sign. And I showed that to my wife, Ann. She said, man, that's stupid. And I said, you're right. So, but P.S., my pistol has night sights. Sign stayed there for the rest of the election. But look, and people get involved as grassroots activists on different levels. Some of you get involved in the election side. That's certainly where I spent my time, knocking doors. I was a precinct chairman. I was election judge. I was on the Collin County Republican Executive Committee. And you know, and elections matter. In 2012, Evan Smith, CEO of the Texas Tribune, interviewed the three incoming Republican senators who've been in the House, Senators Hancock, Taylor, and Paxton. And he said in that interview, this is the most conservative Senate in the history of the state of Texas. And then he interviewed me and Connie Burton and Brandon Creighton in his interview in 2014. And he said, this is going to be the most conservative Senate in the history of the state of Texas. And I'm confident that when he interviews Brian Hughes and Don Buckingham, he will say, this will be the most conservative Senate in the history of the state of Texas. But he's saying that because of you, because of the grassroots efforts of you guys going out, making phone calls, knocking doors, writing checks, doing whatever you're doing to support conservatives. You know, I mean, a lot of us like to talk about our scorecards. Here's my scorecard. I just want to point this out. Texas Fiscal Responsibility, A. Texas Right to Life, A. Texas Equal Forum, A. Conservative for America, A. Texas Values, A. NRA, A. American Conservative Union, A. My mother said, why'd you wait so long to get straight A's, man? But this is not my scorecard. This is your scorecard. This is because you elected conservatives to the legislature. And it is a reflection of the grassroots that Texas consistently is sending more and more conservatives to make our government what it is. And it is mission critical that you continue to do that on the election side. In the legislative process, your participation is critical. And I'll point one past action. So Representative Scott Sanford had the Passenger Protection Act, passed the Senate relatively easily, goes over to the House. Didn't look like it was going to get a hearing. And then pastors from around the state in a 24, 48-hour period flooded Chairman Byron Cook's office with phone calls saying, we want a hearing on this. And the story goes, he went to Representative Sanford and said, I get it, we'll have a hearing. And it passed out, it went on the floor, and it went almost, how many votes against it? Like 4? 3. I mean, just, so that was something that the grassroots rose up, spoke with one voice at a key moment, and they made something happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I mean, without the grassroots calling in, making, expressing what they wanted, I don't think that bill would have been heard in state affairs last session. And then I'll go with property taxes. The Lieutenant Governor appointed me, 6 other senators, to be on a select committee on property tax reform and relief. We did hearings around the state. When we began it, a lot of people were very tentative about legislators were tentative about whether or not we do anything. And we have had such a huge outpouring of people that are upset about their property taxes. It is my understanding that there are multiple jurisdictions here in Tarrant County that decided that they're not going to increase taxes at all as a direct result of these hearings that go around the state and get input. But whether or not the Senate is successful, and we will pass a property tax reform bill to reduce property taxes out of the Senate. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We go into the policy reasons for it. But whether or not that's successful is really going to depend more on the grassroots than the Senate. It's going to depend on the grassroots encouraging their reps to do, to do what they want. And I don't want to tell you what to do. Go for lower taxes, just saying. But it is the grassroots that are ultimately going to make that happen. That are going to apply the pressure to the House members that are then in turn going to apply pressure to leadership that are then in turn going to have something happen there. And the more pressures that apply, the better that bill will be. And how good that bill will be, the Senate will pass as good a bill as we can get it. I think that if it gets over the House, it'll be better if it gets on the floor. Another issue is school choice. That's something that a lot of legislators are very scared of. Lieutenant Governor Patrick has been very, and let me just say that the Senate, I want to go back to the grassroots thing. You guys, in getting conservatives elected to the legislature, have made a huge difference. If you take those scorecards of the Rice study, which is the best study, or a study, but anyway, the Rice study we got 8 new Republican senators in the Texas Senate out of 20 Republicans out of 31 senators. Of the top 10 conservatives in the Senate, 8 were freshmen. 8 were freshmen. You sent 8 of the top 10 conservatives last session, and that is shaping and changing and empowering. And also, you sent a new lieutenant governor. I mean, it wasn't always so rosy from the Senate. It just wasn't. It used to be the conservative stuff started in the House and died in the Senate. You've changed that in the Senate, and you're continuing to change that in the House. And so your input is unquestionably mission critical. The other thing I'll say is the House generally tends to send a lot of their legislation later in session to the Senate. And that makes it allows the Senate to decide which they're going to pick and choose. And we absolutely look at which, if a bill had a majority of Republicans in the House vote against it and it comes to the Senate, it's going to have a very hard time. So that even though it passed, hey, it passed with 80 votes or 90 votes or 100 votes, but if a majority of the Republicans opposed it, the Senate is going to look very hard at that because clearly there's some issues there. So even if your Republican member is casting a losing vote, it's still very important because it sends a signal to the Senate that, hey, there's an issue here, there's a problem.
Can I say something?
Yeah. Unless your time's up anyways. There were like a total of over 10 bills last session that sailed through the House where the only no vote was like me or Rinaldi or Tony Tinderhold that the governor vetoed. Which was really cool. So what Van is saying too, sometimes if you can just convince one person to do the right thing that does send an alarm, and that would, I think you're the one that you had some too, that you were the only no vote on. It was fun to go back through and be like, did the governor notice that we voted no, and then we basically got a veto? It was pretty cool, yeah.
I one with that too, just on that same note, I didn't mean to hijack you, by the way. No, on that same note, I sit next to one of the reps who had a bill that passed the House 140 to 5, I think it was, and me and Stickland were 2 of the 5 like usual. And went over to the Senate, and obviously the Senate's pretty conservative and they have thousands of bills, so they're looking at, when we go in, I'm looking at if Senator Taylor voted against the bill or Connie Burton voted against the bill, and then they're looking at who voted against the bill in the House. So this rep, I was like, oh, how's your bill you were pushing through or whatever, because he really focused on this bill. And he goes, can't get it through the Senate. It's like, why? He goes, because you people voted against it. Like, it was like 5 of us. He goes, I know, and they won't pass it.
So, but the net of it is the grassroots have a really important role in electing people and participating in the legislative process. And the other thing I'll say is that I have 100% meeting policy. And my best legislative ideas do not come from my brain; they come from yours. You guys, you're helping to run the state, and I appreciate your input and thoughts. I can't get everything done that you want to get done, but I absolutely want to hear what your ideas are because a lot of them become law. So be involved in the process. The other thing I'll say, and this is when I was a precinct chairman, I had no shame of going down the hall in my office and talking to every single person in my office who came to voting time and convincing them to vote our way. And even I convinced some of the Democrats to vote against their own people because, I was like, look, this person's an embarrassment to your party. You don't want them there, vote for the Republican. I get it. So expand your sphere of influence, exert your sphere of influence. And you, I want to thank you for making Texas better. Texas is a great state. We're winning. We're becoming more conservative. We've got a better government. We've got a better system. It is sad to see some of these blue states literally drive their state into the ditch, and they're doing it because they don't have grassroots involvement and grassroots engagement. They don't have events like this. They don't have organizations like Empower Texans or Right to Life that are marshaling people, because there's a Matt Rinaldi and a Jonathan Stickland and a Van Taylor that want to be elected to the California Senate, the California Assembly. They just don't have a group like this to come talk to and say, help me. So you guys are mission critical to making sure that Texas continues to be a success. I appreciate you taking your Saturday to be here. So with that, I think we'd love to take your questions or maybe tell more stories about each other.
Thank you. I usually don't praise legislators, but the 3 of you shared the front mic very well today, and I know you're not used to speaking at the front mic, so. Who has questions? Laura.
Worst way someone has tried to engage you into their issue?
Legislator?
Legislator or grassroots?
Yeah.
Any constituent, not constituent, but not legislators.
Sure. Probably the worst way is empty threats. Anger. If you don't vote this way. Actually, one thing I will say: it is illegal to say if you don't vote this way, I'll run against you. I mean, that's actually, statutorily, it's tit for tat. You can't walk in and say if you vote this way, I'll give you a check. I mean, right? That's illegal. So you cannot tie a vote to an act of some kind, just so everybody stays legal and does it. Well, I don't want anybody here to get threatened by somebody else for getting excited about a particular vote. But look, it's a repeat game. Hopefully you'll be in front of your legislator many times to ask them for votes, and sometimes you're not. We're all not going to agree on everything. I mean, that's how life is. And if you think you agree on everything, go talk to your spouse and ask them if you agree on everything. But it is a repeat game. I think it's important to be civil and to be kind. It is not a good idea to be threatening and angry. I think that's some of the worst is be firm. I'm really adamant. This is really important to me. But understand you can only do that so many times until it's just, look, I've bent, and I'm not going to, I legislator, I'm just not going to go any further.
Mine's real easy. This is going to sound bad, but the first thing that my staff is instructed to do is to get an address. do you live in my district? So calling your own legislator is a bigger responsibility than anything else. The next thing we do is we check and see if you voted.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decide how important you are. The truth.
I guess aside from the threatening, interactions, which for some reason always happened on the gay marriage issue, I think the worst thing I got was the email was, "I hope you die, #LoveWins." But there was one constituent in my district who was a Moms Demand Action person who exhibited all of these kind of things we were talking about. First of all, she didn't follow through on threats that she made because she would interact with me not remembering that she called me every day during session and then say, well, what do you think on this issue? Because I might still vote for you. And I'm looking at the voter rolls and she already voted. So things like that. And then during session, be civil and don't have them write you off as someone who can't be, reasoned with or anything like that. Like that same lady would call my office every single day, sometimes twice a day, about the same issue, still talking, still having the same things, and would hang up whenever we would say something back. So actually what happened was my wife was over with us at session, and she just decided that I'm going to call her every day. So she started calling her going, "Have anything new about gun control?" And then finally the lady said, "Stop calling me." Never heard from her again.
Actually, and I will say that just to, the order of magnitude is, if you visit a legislator, that's a bigger deal than if you write a letter is a bigger deal than if you write an email, than if you put something on Twitter. So just there is an order of magnitude. The other thing is, and I'm talking about networks. I mean, it is more powerful to have communication from your constituents means more than communication from outside your district, right? So and that's because that's who you're supposed to represent. I mean, you want legislators to listen to their district and not listen to outside people trying to influence their votes. So,
but there's an exception, which is if I think that this person is a donor and gives to a lot of people, or this person will show up outside, in my district, even if they're outside and block walk against me. We all know those. Every one of the legislators knows who the big grassroots activists, movers, and shakers are. They just do. They just do. I love it when Charlie Garrett comes up to me, and I think we're being recorded. So when Charlie came up to me, and it was very often he would be like, "Did you see what Julie McCarty posted on Facebook?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, 4 minutes ago she did this, and I was like, it always got me. These people are following some folks, and Julie probably had no idea that they do, but they do.
So, but the quality of your interaction does matter, and it's probably more influential if you can get people, in another legislator's district to communicate in. Another thing that does some legislators, I do, is they track what is the input been from the public on this particular bill, and so so that is it is a report. I look at it. I go into session with big binders of paper. So, but it is it's important the number. And the other thing I'll say is, so I believe in proper tax relief. Everybody knows that. I'm very adamant about it. The more letters I get from my constituents about it, the better I can do representing them. I opened the property tax hearing in Plano, Texas, reading 15 different letters, and it was amazing. It did a great job of framing the debate, setting up the discussion, but it was because my constituents cared enough to respond to me when I said, "Please send me your letters. Please tell me what you think of property tax relief. Please explain this," because then I could do a better job representing them because I had their opinions in writing that was irrefutable that I handed to all the members, and it was really hard for them to say, "Well, you're just making this up, Senator," or "You're just taking one or two people." Look, these are people I've never talked to, I've never met, who took the time to sit down and write out what they thought. And even though they know that their legislators with them, it helps the legislator who is with them to make the argument to the other legislators. So just because Jonathan and I and Matt here are with you, help us to do a better job by interacting with us and giving us ammunition for the fights.
It is like ammunition, and he probably didn't know. Darrell Easton over here, he just took a big bite. Darrell saved me numerous times because he would fax over a different things how he wanted me to vote on things. We keep everything, like every handwritten note, letter I've ever gotten is in my office. We keep everything, and I would just love when like a special interest or a lobbyist would come in and try and switch your vote, and be like, well, I get this fax here from Darrell Easton, and he's a very active Republican precinct chair. I just can't help you, sorry. I mean, it's like, it's a defense for us. You insulate us from these things. But let's get another question, because we're...
Yes, ma'am, over here.
Great.
I understand the constituent thing, that you place higher priority on constituent contacts. But what about if I contact you as a non-constituent, but I am representing the Northeastern Tea Party? Does that carry weight? Or
Yes, absolutely. And the biggest thing is like, whenever y'all go out walking for folks and they see the Facebook posts, like Texans for Vaccine Choice, so I see in the back there, they did a block walk for our campaign, and like 40 women showed up, all wearing shirts, and everybody in the state notices. And when the Northeastern Tea Party does their block walks, so yes, it does carry weight. I mean, it's kind of a sliding scale, but if they know that you're going to go out there and work a poll, or that you're going to go block walk or show up, then that does carry more weight, absolutely.
Questions for Matt. When you were speaking, you made a lot of great points in the first 5 minutes, but I was actually in the middle of eating, so I wasn't really paying attention. I was wondering if you would mind just kind of going over a couple points in the first part of your talk, and I would appreciate it. Plus, I block walked these better answers.
You're assuming that I remember anything I said. Could you give me the general topic? No, seriously, can you give me the general topic of what I talked about the first 5 minutes?
You talk about passing laws and then the process of how that happens.
Bill heard in committee.
Before you start talking about calendars.
Oh, okay. So, first step of the process is pre-filing, which starts next week. So we pre-file bills in November. You can start getting an idea as to what the legislators consider their own most important priorities, because that's what they pre-file. Second step, you go into committee. The bill gets assigned to a committee. Then the next step is to pressure the committee chairs to hear the bill in committee and pressure members of the committee to demand that bill's heard. Then once the bill's heard, you have to continue pressuring them in order to vote on the bill. It should be voted out relatively quickly, but they'll hold the vote in order to delay the bill. So then you got to get a vote on the bill. After you get a vote on the bill, then it goes to calendars, and then you got to pressure calendars to get it on the floor.
I'm going to come to this side.
I just want to build on sometimes just going to groups, whatever, pastors from across the state calling one committee office. And you kind of say, well, gee, he's responding to people that are not in his district. But part of that is thinking, wait a minute, if I'm getting pastors calling me from around the state, me holding this up is going to create problems for a lot of the other members for crew. It's only a matter of time the pastor calls the committee chair, and then they start calling their own member to talk to the committee chair. So that does go into people's brains. The president of TFRW calling a committee chair saying, we want you to hear the voter ID bill. That committee member is like, wow, I'm going to have angry Republican women around the state calling. I mean, it's just, they can see what's behind the corner. That's not hard to figure out, I think, for anybody.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any advice on how to interact with your office staff on educating them so they can help us bring these issues to you and educate you on them?
Our staff are some of the most underappreciated people in our movement. Understand that our staff, at least for us as conservatives, our staff pay the prices that we do. Once you work for Van Taylor, you're limited on who will hire you in the future. It's just the truth. And probably way worse for me and Rinaldi. But listen, our staff have a very tough job. These guys are working for next to nothing. One of the advantages the establishment has is they supplement their staff through their campaign accounts. And a lot of us can't do that effectively. So I think the biggest thing is just love on them and treat them like normal people. I will tell you, at least the staffers in our offices are here because they believe what we believe. Otherwise, they would not be doing it. I think With the legislators, you can do a lot more vinegar. With the staff, a little bit of honey goes a long way, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
On the subject of getting constituents to interact with you guys mentioned having letters and faxes. It's been my experience that baby steps to get people involved helps. And something that's easy to do is to set up an online petition and have people sign it from, like link it from Facebook. Will that carry any weight with you guys? What are the best baby steps that we can take to get our groups to start getting involved?
Yes, it can. I wanted to bring up a quick point that you spurred in my mind. When you're meeting with your legislator, the tendency is always to just talk. I've got his attention. I've got him one-on-one. I'm going to sit here and talk. Listen, I represent 170,000 people, okay? And frankly, talk to grassroots all across the state. If you will establish that you can accomplish a lot in a 2-minute conversation and know exactly what you want to say and be respectful of our time or our staff's time, huge. You will get another meeting if I think that that's the kind of person you are. It's hard for me to get excited about meeting with someone if I think it's going to be an hour-long conversation, and when it's over, I can't remember anything that you've said. So on the time, a lot of times in politics, less is more. And I will tell you, when you're meeting with your legislator, words, pick them very carefully. Think about what you're going to say before you do. Be respectful of your time, and it will actually end up getting you more time as you go along.
Just to build on that, baby steps do matter.
Yes.
Petitions do matter. I mean, I'm one of the very few officers in the legislature that have a 100% response policy. So if you send an email, if you're a constituent, you send an email, a fax, a letter, a phone call. I mean, I personally signed 17,102 letters last year. Personally.
No, I just wanted to point out too, it's something that wasn't said, is you got to know your legislator as well and what motivates them, because the most important interactions for me are the substantive ones, right? So you can give me an online petition. Okay, it's kind of hard to gauge public opinion by an online petition, a poll, anything else. Listen, the way I gauge public opinion is I make campaign promises, and then if I get reelected, I fulfill them. That's the best way that I can gauge public opinion. So I promise to limit government, I promise to cut taxes. When you show substantively how a bill fits in line with my principles, that to me is the best way to show that public opinion is in favor of my bill. Done.
Yes, sir.
I'm Chuck Harger. I was supposed to have died about 13 years ago with cancer. I said, Lord, if you'll help me live through this, I'll witness to anybody and everybody that comes in my path. And I think it's a great embarrassment when our president became president. I thought, well, he should bring us together, black and white. And instead, it's gotten worse. And I look around this audience, and at every table, there's somebody that knows a black man or a black woman. And for my two friends here, they think I'm going to get beat up all the time because I walk up to monsters compared to this little guy. And I said, remember, under Jesus, there is no black and white. We're all brothers. Don't forget that. And then I throw in that I had a roommate in officer school in 1951 that was black. That was my first experience with a black man because I was raised where they were stupid. He beat me on every test. He was that intelligent. And here we sat, representatives from all around this fantastic state. Reach out. I dare you. I dare you to reach out and say, remember, we're brothers and sisters under Jesus Christ. Amen. Do it.
I appreciate those words. Did you have a question, or did? Okay, because we got like 2 minutes left, and there were a couple of hands over here. Tricia.
You stated a moment ago that they can supplement staff salaries with campaign funds.
Sure.
Is that ethical?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I listen.
It's an office holder.
Yeah, so our staff gets paid out of the state, and then we have our campaign accounts that we raise money for, and we can pay them through the campaign as well.
You can pay office expenses from, it's a campaign and office holder account.
And honestly, that's what you want to do, because let me tell you what happens. I mean, I pay every one of my staffers something out of the campaign, because inevitably, they're going to be getting a call from the state, on the state line, and someone has a question about a specific bill, and then they talk to them, and every so often someone will go, well, you tell Jonathan to bring me by a yard sign, which all of a sudden you're on a state time and line, but there's a campaign question or what have you. So, a lot of people do that just to supplement the taxpayer dollars are not being spent on a campaign activity or what have you. Does that make sense?
I know we're short on time. I'm going to interject with a question here. We talked earlier about how important it is to know your opponents. So if you quickly kind of go down the line, tell me who most commonly are the opponents, the lobbyists, special interest groups, whomever, that are most commonly standing in our way of getting good legislation through both chambers.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, okay, so first of all, the Texas Association of Business on any social issues is the biggest group against. They stand up not for small businesses, not for free markets, they stand up for large businesses and handouts. Secondly, and most importantly also, the realtors. The realtors group is very, very much standing against us on most of this legislation. They do what leadership tells them to, or House leadership tells them to at least, and they're very much standing in the way. I would say those are the two largest at least. And then also Texas Trial Lawyers Association on a lot of the liberal conservative issues as well.
I will say one of the issue part of being a Texas legislator is that your friends and enemies change. Someone who's with you on one thing will be against you on another thing, and so it is. It's hard for me. There are certainly some liberal groups out there that are very difficult to work with, but there are many that sometimes you can come together to get something good done. And the legislature is a more fun place to work than DC because the lines are not nearly as bright. And for those of you that are part of some of these organizations and getting them to be more conservative, that is a great thing too. I mean, activism is not just about elections and legislature, it's also about these third-party groups that influence the legislature.
Well, I like to name names, so I'll do it. Just Byron Cook is horrible. And all of his friends. TMA is a huge enemy of conservative principles, Texas Medical Association. It's really sad too because they're funded by doctors who in a lot of cases are very conservative. They're essentially small business owners, but they're busy, and that's the problem in general, is a lot of folks are just busy with life and they assume Texas is pro-gun, pro-life, I mean, because we all are individually, but that hasn't translated into legislation because people have fallen asleep at the wheel for a very long time. TMA is a bad one. Texas Alliance for Life is horrible. There are some fake pro-life groups that have been given cover to guys all across the state. Look at who's funding them. Look at the bills. Read them yourself. You'll see it. They have figured out that they have to run as a conservative, so there are a number of different groups that they have propped up to give them cover. And Texas Alliance for Life is one of them. But the biggest enemy to killing legislation or stopping good legislation is the fact that most politicians, if they could draw up the political world, would rather do nothing. Their ideas will give them just enough to not notice. That's their idea. So, like, what is the minimum amount that we can do to rock the boat? We don't want to change anything. And that's why, those who push the most this way are the ones that usually get what they want because they feel the pressure. But I think the biggest enemy to the conservative legislative agenda is just the fact that most politicians view it as the least votes that I have to take, the least amount of people that are going to get involved in the process or know what's going on. That's kind of their goal, and that hurts us big time.
All right, well, we are short on time. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.